Welcome, horror fam, to HHN 365, a Halloween Horror Nights podcast. My name is Mike, and I'm here with my co-host, Duff.
Hey, guys.
And our producer, Nico.
Hey, howdy, hey.
On today's show, we're going to discuss our initial thoughts on the two houses at Universal that have opened up as part of their Halloween seasonal experience testing, followed by a quick trip report from our outing at Screamin' Stream's media preview. And we actually have an official announcement on how this is going to play out, don't we, Duff?
We absolutely do. And according to Universal Orlando, this fall is going to be scary good. So this weekend, which is September 26th and the 27th, and then also October 3rd through November 1st, that is every single weekday included, we're going to have those two houses operating. We're also going to have skeleton bars, scarecrow stock, the food trucks, and twisted tater dog concoction, whatever the fuck they are. All of it. All of it. So we're going to have a shit ton of time to go through these houses is what I'm excited about.
So what exactly is scarecrow stock?
So scarecrow stock is, basically every gift shop throughout the park has different, I say scarecrow in quotations because they're more skeletons. I don't know why they call it scarecrow stock. I guess it just sounds better.
Yeah.
Basically, but you find those, you get it stamped, and then you get a treat at the end. The treats seem to basically be like candy corn or some kind of Halloween treat in a bag.
Okay.
But it's pretty cool. They have some pretty detailed ones. The Transformers one is pretty cool. The one that's in the Betty Boop store looks like the female gremlin and has the exaggerated breasts as well.
Okay.
So that's awkward.
Hey.
All right.
Hey. There's our hot house this year.
There we go. Boop, boop, be doop.
But yeah, so basically everything you saw during the preview weekend, we're going to have this coming weekend and then October 3rd all the way to November 1st. So if you miss the houses, don't worry. You'll have a chance to hit them again.
Awesome.
If you're local. If you were traveling, I'm sorry. But I think as far as news and rumors go, that's about it because we actually had something to do this weekend.
Yeah, perfect. So, let's hop right into it. So, let's start with the annual pass holder preview on Friday. That was our first kind of look at it, right? At least one of our first looks. Wasn't all of us.
Yeah, so it was for Premier Pass holders only. A few days beforehand, we did have to book our times online. And that became a mess for a lot of people. I thought I had it bad because it took me about 30 to 40 minutes to get through the system. And apparently it took people hours and hours to do it. So I kind of lucked out. I feel for anyone who waited hours and then potentially got fucked day of because I'll let Nico pick up what can happen on that day to some people.
Oh, you mean like what happened to me?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So basically it was, you need this thing, you're going to get like a ticket. You can either set it to pick it up at will call at one of the ticket booths or print at home. Well, I knew I was going to be short on time that day, so I selected print at home, and I never got my confirmation email. So I was thinking, okay, that's fine. I can just go to guest services and get that, and then I'll be able to do the two houses. Well, it turns out that for some reason my time never got processed. Like I was in the system, but it was in a point where I really couldn't do anything else. Like it was just stuck there. At least that's what guest services explained to me. So they tried to get me through at least one house that night, which they tried to get me into Bride because apparently Tooth Fairy had filled up completely for its allocation of people that could go through that day. And every time they try to get me authorization to go through the bride's house, it kept disappearing from the system that they used. Fortunately, I did tell her that I was coming the next day because I was going to get Mike in that day. And she was like, well, I can get you as many people in your party that's coming tomorrow. I can get you one free express for one of the houses tomorrow. So
they definitely made good on it.
They definitely did make good, but this is also something that Universal does need to definitely work on. This isn't the first time they've tried to do a special event like this, and it turns out to kind of bite them in the butt and not go as well as they've planned before. That is something that they need to work on. Like I said, the recovery was fine, and I understand that they were trying their best, and there was definitely heavy demand for this, but they have to figure out a better system. If they're going to do things like this, they can't, have these issues that take up 30 to 40 minutes, especially since, you can't have all your desks staffed because you have to have social distancing at guest services. You can't have them all just lined up in a row at the computers. You have to have them distanced out. It's just something that I hope that they will improve on. They will learn from this situation so they don't have to hand out as much recovery on the back end.
Yeah. And it sounds like, compared to what some of the other people have had to deal with over the weekend with virtual queue and some of the other things that were going on, we actually were very fortunate. That was kind of our main hiccup, was just on Friday, because Saturday was pretty smooth sailing.
So we should talk about those who were able to go into houses on Friday, because it wasn't smooth sailing at that point either.
Okay.
So I will say, throughout the day, I had a later slot, so we'll get to me later. But throughout the day, waits were somewhere between 60 and 90 minutes most of the time for the houses. I don't know if it was kind of a capacity issue or just how many people in each slot they were allowing, rather than like a total capacity. But there were very long waits. And then on top of all the issues that happened trying to get it, all the issues people had getting in, because I actually had the same issue as Nico. I just got there earlier, so the houses hadn't hit their daily capacity, so I was able to go in at my time slot. It just took like 45 minutes to an hour at guest services to get it fixed and get my ticket to get in. But yeah, so throughout the day, it wasn't very smooth. When I come in at 4:30, which was the last slot, as the park closed at 5 o'clock, we went into Bride first, came out, sprinted right over to Tooth Fairy, and it had already reached capacity for the day at 5:15, 5:20-ish, maybe. Even though the actual ticket had stated this is till 5:30. It's fine. I understand that, they stated at any point these houses could shutter operation, or they could hit capacity. So you aren't guaranteed entrance to both houses necessarily.
Right.
But a lot of this stemmed from, not necessarily for me, but for a lot of other people, from the fact that they had to wait in line with guest services for over an hour. So they got into their time slots late. So they could only do one house, or not do a house at all in some cases. So did not go well Friday overall. And I remember we were talking like, if this is up in the air, this is not looking good to return after this weekend.
Right.
But luckily, like you said, things started to get a little bit smoother as the weekend went on.
At least for us.
It did for everybody.
For everyone.
Saturday was tough morning-wise.
Yes, but, I know a lot of virtual queue spots filled up very quickly. So.
But I think there's also... So let's actually just kind of tell it as a story. So let's start off where the day was. Mike, do you want to tell them like when we got there and what we did?
Yeah, these motherfuckers made me wake up like at 6 a.m, which was totally fine.
Which was a smart idea.
It was actually, smart. And we got to the park, I would say, about 7. So we could be at guest relations at 7:30 to pick up the express passes that were promised for Nico. And then once that was a very quick process. They got me my guest pass as well, because Nico was using his Premier pass that had replaced his Halloween Hornets ticket to get me in for the day. That was great. we basically headed over to get in line because we heard a rumor that they were not going to doing virtual queue right away. They were actually going to fill the lines, and then once the lines got full, then they would do virtual queue. And it turns out that was a good idea because that's exactly basically what happened. Then we kind of saw on the app that it was saying that Brides was going to open at 9 and Tooth Fairy was going to open at 9 and Brides was going to open at 10. So we kind of got the game plan that we were going to quickly rush over to Tooth Fairy because Brides wasn't going to be open. Who wants to take over the next part?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, we rush over to Tooth Fairy. We get in, stand by, no problem. But basically, what was it? 3, 4, 5-ish groups after us is when they cut it off for virtual queue. And when I say cut it off, I mean they held it until we cleared the queue, and then they started letting virtual queue in after.
Yeah, there were maybe like two or three groups. Also, when we were walking over to a Tooth Fairy, they had filled the line for the Bride. Yeah. So that 10 o'clock open was not accurate. They opened Bride at the same time as Tooth Fairy.
Correct. Yeah.
So we, of course, while we're sitting in line, decide to take a peek for some virtual queue. Mm-hmm. Nico, did we snatch it in queue or after?
We snatched it in queue. We snatched it as we walked in because they let us in slightly before 9 o'clock. Because we were in the Tooth Fairy line before 9 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So we had our phones out and ready. I was able to snag us a bride. I was able to snag us a bride. A bride for 10.50 because every time I refreshed, it kept timing out. And the times got later and later. But, we had our extra express tickets. So we were like, okay, that's fine. We'll figure out what we can do here. We couldn't get a time for anything else. I was trying for Tooth Fairy. And I couldn't get anything else.
Yeah, I was struggling with the app to basically, and this happened like as we were about to enter Tooth Fairy, we noticed the times because I remember struggling with the app and going through kind of the black corridor being like, oh, I better just give up. Because we're about to go into the house. Yeah, it was like perfect timing that because you were able to snag it and you're just like, Mike, just drop it. Doesn't matter. I got us one. Let's go through this house.
Yeah, and then I'd say to save some time and not take you through our entire day of what you kind of expect it to be. I'll just lay out what we did house-wise. We did one standby for Tooth Fairy, and we did one virtual queue for Tooth Fairy. We did one express pass for Bride, and we also did one virtual queue for Bride. So we did each house twice that day, within 2 hours. So
yeah, we did 4 houses in 2 hours. I would like to brag that we used our express tickets for Bride, and as soon as we left Bride, you said, "Hey, it's 9:30," and I checked my phone, and then I got us a 9:50 for Tooth Fairy, which was 20 minutes from when we left Bride. So.
Which tip, if this ever comes up again where it's super busy and houses hit capacity right away, probably will happen again. Every 30 minutes, they try to reopen some availability, some time slots in virtual queue. Mm-hmm. And from our experience, it happened every time. There were slots that opened every 30 minutes. Are you necessarily going to be able to get it, while everyone else is looking? No, but you're going to have the chance every 30 minutes. Right. So go out there, keep refreshing. Don't give up because it says house at capacity, because they are not at capacity. They were at the current capacity given to virtual queue. That's it. They are going to open up more. And I'll say it now and not save it for later. The last 2 hours, it's just walk on. You just walk to the house and go in. No virtual queue. It's great. I did it on Sunday. Fantastic.
So
we should add that Sunday also was not nearly as busy. They did not do standby in the morning. They started off virtual queue. Otherwise, it went about the same. There were still people complaining that they had trouble getting good virtual queue times. That's unfortunately the nature of the beast when you use a system like that. But again, go later. You're going to get in the houses. Don't worry.
Yeah, it sounds like the strategy, if you're really trying to only have a couple of hours, either do what we did and get there bright and early and crank out, be lucky and crank out the houses in the first couple of hours. But that one's going to be luck on your side, or you can arrive within the last 2 hours and crank things out that way. Those are going to be your two strategies if you only have a couple of hours to see these houses.
Yeah, definitely. You guys want to talk about the actual houses? The fun
Let's do it.
Yeah, I would like to mention just one thing real quick. So virtual queue, when we used our virtual queues, we never waited more than 10 minutes from when we scanned our virtual queue from when we were inside the house. So it literally was virtual queue. It wasn't you sign in and then you wait another 30 minutes to an hour. No, it's like it was almost immediate entry.
And I guess we could address, there are a lot of people saying, wow, there is so much space in the queue. Why don't you use it? Well, my friends, that is a sign of virtual queue doing its job.
Exactly.
Yes, you don't want to pack out the queues. That's not the point of virtual queue. You're already waiting 3 hours for your time. Do you want to go sit out in the sun for another hour in the queue? Also, these queues only hold about 45 minutes while they're socially distanced. So it's kind of tough to pack it out,
Right.
So be happy that you only have to wait 10 minutes in those queues. It is a good thing, I promise. It just means everything is running smoothly.
That part was great, that we were able to just get right into the houses and not have to die in the heat, which was, I would say, definitely a major difference between seeing these houses during the day is just how quickly it got hot.
I will say I did get a very awkward double hat and mask sunburn.
Yes.
Very weird the next day.
I am sunburnt as well.
The back of my ears are sunburnt and it hurts every once in a while. I'm like, ow.
All right, so the fun part, houses.
Yay.
You want to do it in the order that we did it on Saturday?
Sure.
Awesome. So we started with Tooth Fairy, and I think I had it higher. We never said it. We never made official hype list, but it was higher on my hype list.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
I'm sure Nico probably had Bride higher.
I had Bride as my number one hype.
Yeah, I figured. But yeah, so Revenge of the Tooth Fairy. Initial reactions. Anyone really enjoy it? Really hate it?
I liked it. I wouldn't say I really enjoyed it. I liked it. I liked it, I think, more than you guys did, probably, right? From our light discussions that we've had.
I don't know. I thought I really enjoyed it.
Okay, so maybe we're on the same page. One of us is not, and we'll get to that in a second.
So before we get to that, do we want to talk about why we liked it?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to go first, stuff on what you thought?
So honestly, first of all, one of the first things you see is this amazingly unique facade. Yes. I've never seen a facade quite like this.
Yeah.
It was a good scale, and I mean, this isn't spoiler free, so we'll say it. It's like a moving storybook, like the ones where you pull the tabs. Basically telling the story of this child named James who does not want to give his tooth up to the Tooth Fairy. So the fairies murder him and his family. And you can get a little bit of this from that storybook facade.
Right.
It is so cool. It's in kind of like a sepia tone, would you say?
Yeah.
Style.
Like almost black and white, right?
Yeah. But yeah, no, this facade was extremely impressive. Mainly because how unique it was. I loved it. So right off the bat, number one, facade's great. The story is very in your face. They tell you exactly what's going on from the second you're in the entrance hallway.
Right.
Turning the corner. You have narration throughout. You kind of have the storybook lettering in each room, basically, telling you a base of where the plot is at that point. And
yeah, very Cat in the Hat-esque. I liked it.
Definitely.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I can see that. And I'm a huge fan of when you can understand the story, because there are times where there is a cool story, but you have to go through it 15 times before you really get a grasp on it.
Uh-huh.
If that, there's houses where you just never fully understand the story. You're like, what the hell's going on? That's not happening here. They let you know what's going on, and it's a cool story, I think. Again, basically, little James doesn't believe in the fairies. Then he quickly learns that they're real. He should have given up his teeth. They murder everyone in his household, his nanny, the butler, his parents, his grandparents, and then they turn him into a fairy as well at the end.
Yeah.
Another thing I really enjoyed was the sets.
Oh yeah.
House kind of felt more like a tent because it was super claustrophobic. It had that kind of Victorian feel to it. It definitely felt like a scary tales style house.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, the sets looked great. I love a nice claustrophobic house. When this house is running the way it should be, without plexiglass and all that, the scares will be fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I loved how it started basically from the first you got into that entry hallway. It really started to tell the story. You have the narration immediately playing. You kind of have the signs above you basically already telling the story, and then you turn that corner and then you see that facade. You're like, okay, this is the type of house that this is going to be, and they just kind of build from there. It's really fun. I really like that Hans Christian Andersen kind of feel of it. That's kind of what the vibe I got. It's kind of like one of those kind of like Pied Piper feeling stories. That's like when you hear it when you're a kid and you're like, wait, why is this a kid story? This is really super gruesome. Like why is Hansel and Gretel pushing like like getting pushed into a fire pit. Like as I was a kid, I always really liked those stories, and I thought this was a fun play on those fairy tales that are actually really gruesome and scary. But we read them to our children anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely it does. I did want to add also character design. I really like the fairies.
I did too.
Yeah. They're all small, like kind of hive-looking creatures.
Yeah,
with red eyes and wings, and they just look really good. They look really good, and again, I can't wait till they can actually jump into my face and give me an actual good scare. And then I did mention it, but we never fully established this before we started talking about houses. But every single scare actor you encounter will be behind plexiglass or like that sheet covering.
Yeah, like plastic, like
that that
plastic vinyl almost. Yeah.
So a scare actor will never actually be like out in your face in any way. You will always have a barrier.
Yes.
Which we'll talk about more how we feel about that after we sum up the houses, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's going to play a big part in when we get to our negatives, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, Nico, did you have any positives about this house? We've already kind of.
The facade was really good. The character design also really enjoyed. There was a really cool puppet gag there in the kitchen scene that was there. That I thought that was really well done. Unfortunately, it wasn't there on my second run through, but on my first one, it was there. I thought it was. I thought it was good. It's definitely in the probably. I don't know exactly where I'd put it in my all-time rankings since I only have 12 to choose from.
We're actually going to kind of do that later, so hold on to that.
Yeah, so I don't know where I would put it quite yet, so I'll keep thinking about that. But I didn't hate the house. I mean, it's definitely better than Killer Clowns. So,
take a shot.
Yeah, take a shot there. But yeah, I mean, I liked it. I definitely liked it my second time through. I guess because I was the leader the first time through, and I was afraid of getting spooked. So as the sacrificial lamb, I am going through these things. But yeah, I like it, but I just didn't like it as much as Bride.
It's fair.
Fair enough.
I do not. I'll get into it later, but nothing wrong with that opinion.
Yeah.
So, what did you not like about the house, really? Like, any main points that just didn't hit for you?
I can start with that. I wouldn't say there's necessarily any points that to me, I was thinking about this over the weekend. I think the main reason why I've left the house and felt a little underwhelmed, and it wasn't necessarily the plexiglass, the fact that it was there, because I honestly didn't mind the plexiglass. I thought I could still get scared with the characters popping out of the plexiglass. To me, it was the types of scares that they were able to do was really limited with the plexiglass. You're not going to get some of those fun, unique surprises that you're going to go through the houses. That the houses at least have 2 or 3 in each house. That's like, oh, okay, that was a fun, unique scare. I wasn't expecting that. There wasn't any of those really because of the plexiglass, and it's not necessarily their fault, but I would say that's what left me underwhelming. Is that they're all kind of one note scares. You know, you're gonna get a boo hole, and you're gonna know if you time it right, there's going to be something coming up to that plexiglass in the boo hole to try to scare you.
Yeah, yep. I actually fully agree with what you just said there. And I do want to add one thing that's about the house itself and not because of the conditions, and that any of the antagonist scares that you get, they don't vary. You're going to get the fairies. That's what you're there for, right? But it is nice to get some variation. It doesn't come now. I say now because there is a lot of missing scares. You can tell it's obvious. There's even one where there's like a long hallway with a projection at the end, where there's obviously supposed to be some sort of kind of different, unique scare. But nothing happens right now. On all of my walkthroughs I've done so far, I've done 5, I believe. There's nothing. So they're just not running it at the moment. I don't know if that's kind of a staffing thing during the testing, or if they just don't want to blow their load before next year.
Yeah.
But again, like you said, I think the plexiglass kind of hinders what they're able to do with the scares. It basically turns into the fairies are kind of trapped in their boo holes completely. They can't come out of them whatsoever.
Yeah.
There's some of them that are at an angle where, they kind of have to come around a corner, and they can't come around that corner. So they're just kind of like smash up against the plexiglass from your side. You're like, oh, hi.
Yeah.
So it hinders it. And I think that I'm going to say that about both houses, as you'd expect. I don't hate it. I don't think it like destroys the house, but it numbs it a bit for sure.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I don't think it was actually just the fact that the plexiglass was there. If actual just kind of regular boo holes had plexiglass, and I think there's a chance that they might not go away. The plexiglass is even without COVID-19, it is a good protector for the characters of not getting punched to have that little bit of a barrier. So they honestly may not go away right away. That's just kind of my gut feeling. I might be totally wrong, and I know that's probably really controversial because I know a lot of people really want those plexiglass gone as quickly as possible. But if you could have those traditional boo holes with plexiglass and then have a bunch of other unique scares without the plexiglass, like the Yeti arm and some of these other puppets, like the Slimer puppet and things like that, with really fun, unique visual scares that don't have the plexiglass, then I think I would be totally fine with it.
I half agree with you. I think it can be done for boo holes, but I think the boo holes kind of have to be, unless you're really lucky, they have to be built in mind for plexiglass. Whereas in this house, that obviously was not the case. You could tell that it severely limited what they could do with their boo holes. Where if they had known ahead of time, they probably would have made the boo holes a little more accessible with the plexiglass to allow for better scares. which when we get to Bride, you'll see. I personally think the plexiglass had much less of a negative effect on the scares. It just kind of lucked out, and that's kind of how the boo holes were. And that wasn't the case in Tooth Fairy, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Or do we have anything else we want to say about Tooth Fairy? Nico, you haven't really got to say what your next.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not a big fan of the storybook aesthetic, to be completely honest with you guys. But I mean, I thought it was well done. But you're right, there was a very much a lack of diversification. It wasn't very diversified in the types of characters you saw. It was just the fairies, up something else, fairies. You know, I wasn't the biggest fan of all that. I don't know. I guess I think the plexiglass and the COVID things really hurts this house a lot. And a lot better more than I thought it was going to. And I think that's why it just didn't quite hit the high notes for me for that house. Like, it was good, but it wasn't great.
Now, there is a house that you really, really, really enjoyed.
Yeah, on the flip side.
That would be The Bride of Frankenstein Lives.
Yes.
So, Nico, you could not stop raving about it all day.
Yeah.
So I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, so Bride of Frankenstein, a sequel to my favorite house of all time, Universal Monsters, from last year. Fantastic house. I know how everybody raves about the opening set of Tooth Fairy, which it is cool. You know, it's unique where you go in there. But when you just walk in there and you see the bride up there and she's trying to lift that thing off of Frankenstein. It's just awesome. And it really sets you up for. That's when I walked in and I saw that, I said, "Oh, here we go." Like, I was excited, a lot more excited than I was going through Tooth Fairy. Just from the beginning.
And I should add,
it up.
You did miss a pre-facade scene where as soon as you walk in, you're kind of like in this like castle wall.
Oh,
There's
yes.
a few bricks removed.
Yes, that
and
part.
You're looking through, and it's a like screen projection of the castle, then crumbling.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that
so
one.
When you walk into the facade, you're seeing that crumbled castle.
Yeah, and they used a lot of projection tricks in this house too, which I really enjoyed. There was a lot more going on in this house than I thought there was in Tooth Fairy, which is maybe why I liked it a little bit more, where you had projections on walls in front of you that showed like the bride, you know, like trying to bring Frankenstein back and doing that. And I think because it is kind of more of a laboratory setup, the plexiglass kind of fits the aesthetic of the house, because you have like people that are just trapped behind there. They're kind of like test subjects that are locked up. And there's even a hallway that has a bunch of people rounded up, and they are like behind glass coffins and stuff. So I think the aesthetic of the plexiglasses really pays off in Bride of Frankenstein. Also, it just felt like more like Halloween Horror Nights to me. I guess that's what I'm looking for. Something in a haunt. I like something like that. And it just really ticked my boxes. I had scratched that itch. I was really happy. I was slightly disappointed in Tooth Fairy, but I was right back on board for Bride.
Now, I do find that an interesting comment, coming from someone whose first year was last year, because the large consensus is that Tooth Fairy is a very classic HHN house. Like, that is what HHN has been and probably will be forever. It always have stuff of that nature that it'll bring back to feel like classic HHN. So it's funny that you said this felt more HHN to you, because at this point you're more used to these kind of elaborate theatrical sets.
Yeah, like Tooth Fairy felt more like Nine Gales to me, where it was like, you know, small and cramped, and you went through like that, which is fine, but I don't know, it was like really dark in there for that, but I liked, you know, big and elaborate. and going all out. I think maybe that's what I like about Horror Nights. I feel like there was more effort put into Bride than there was into Tooth Fairy, and I think that's why I really enjoyed Bride.
Fair. Before we get deeper, we should probably explain the story a little bit before we start explaining some of the scenes. So basically, it's kind of like a sequel, not directly to last year's House, but it's a Bride of Frankenstein sequel.
Right.
So,
it's more a sequel to the movie. It leaves off basically where the movie leaves off.
So Frankenstein, the Frankenstein's monster, should I say, has died. He's crushed under rubble, and basically the Bride of Frankenstein is attempting to bring him back to life. To do so, she's going to need blood and body parts and stuff. So she rounds up a bunch of villagers, Dracula's brides, Gilman, and us walking through the house. So yeah, it's actually a pretty sick house in some of the stuff she is doing. Which I'll talk about some of those scenes for sure. But I'll let Mike talk about what he liked about this house first.
Nico basically covered a lot of what my initial thoughts of the house. It's a very showy house, very theatrical, lots of special effects. It ticks the boxes for me too. It's the reason why I still to this day really enjoyed the Stranger Things 2019 edition. It's just very flashy, very showy, tells a great story. Huge, big show scenes.
I do agree with all of that, but I want to pick out a few specific things that I really liked. When I was saying it's sick, I'm talking a scene where you have one of Dracula's brides kind of like handcuffed in as she's having blood removed from her.
Oh, that seems gross. Oh, it's so
bride
cool.
pulling the lever, and blood curdling screams coming from the Dracula's bride. Absolutely, like you like feel for her. It's like torture, and it's kind of great, like that's what I'm looking for. I like a little gore and like true fear in the house,
it was definitely a lot gorier than Universal monsters.
For sure.
Yes, by far.
Another thing I liked was it's not that there was a lot of character diversity, but there was. So your main scares were going to be Dracula's brides. You also saw Bride of Frankenstein a few times. You saw Frankenstein's monster a few times. There was also a female Igor as well.
Right.
Which was cool.
Yeah. That was cool. I
like the female version of Igor.
And they did mix them up very well. So you didn't get the same scare back to back to back to back. It would kind of be like Igor, Dracula, Bride. Bride of Frankenstein, Igor, so I did enjoy that very much. And there again, like I was saying in Tooth Fairy, there's definitely a scene that we are missing. There's a long hallway, which is believed to be a bungee effect that is not being used currently, which I don't know if we'll see it maybe further down the line this year or until next year, but I look forward to seeing that. And I don't know about you guys, but I think both of these houses were probably turned up a little bit brighter than they're supposed to be. Because
I noticed that. I thought
walking in the middle of the morning that I wouldn't see anything, like at all. Because, if you walk into a house at 6 p.m. at Horror Nights, you already can't see anything.
Right.
But the sun was shining so bright, and I walked in and saw everything perfectly.
I think
they turned up the brightness.
I think that was a COVID-19 type of thing. I think they didn't want people running into walls or touching things, using the walls to feel their way. Also, the glasses fog problem. I was so worried that I would have to take off my glasses and I would not be able to see shit because they were fogged up. It wasn't a problem in there. It was bright enough that I could see where I was going, even with a little bit of glasses fog from the mask.
And that just popped to me out of nowhere. There was one more thing I was going to mention. So the actual guest involvement in the house is really cool. Is that you're actually being sent down to Dracula's brides. They need to devour you so they can have blood for the Bride of Frankenstein to take to bring Frankenstein back to life. So you're actually being sent in there as a sacrifice to bring Frankenstein's monster to life, basically. And I think that's a really cool way to involve the guest. And then the scene where Frankenstein does come back, pretty decent jump scare. I saw it.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely saw it get a few people, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I like to go back to the devour them. I love the throwback to the Dracula scene from last year. I loved that line. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah, it definitely had a few kind of spiritual callbacks to last year. I really loved the house overall. I did. I know I kind of talked about like, oh yeah, I really like Tooth Fairy and let it on. Like I probably liked it more than I liked Bride, but I didn't. I liked Bride a little bit better. I thought
same.
The story was fantastic. The scares were there. It felt natural and not forced, even though it's like all right, monsters did well last year. We're gonna bring it back again. But it was just great. It was a great house. Like I was saying, and like Nico mentioned, less affected by the precautions. So like it has like larger sets and not the such tight corridor boo holes.
Right.
The plexiglass doesn't really get in the way as much. Actually, I can't really think of one scare where it's really hindered by the plexiglass. I don't know if you can.
No, not really.
I think maybe the first Igor scare could be pulled off a lot better, but that's still really good because it kind of distracts your attention. It's designed to do that.
That's one of the like two-way corners.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, so
I mean, if I'm being nitpicky, that's probably the one that stands out the most.
There are definitely some scares that are not being used because of it, but of the scares that are there, I think they're still pretty effective under the current circumstances.
Yeah, totally agree.
Did we have any last things to say about this house before we kind of had final thoughts and possibly ratings on the houses?
No, I don't think so. I think we're all kind of on the same page. Basically, that Tooth Fairy was good, and Brides was good to great, right?
Yeah, I think we agree. So let's get to actually rating the houses, because why not? So we'll start with Tooth Fairy, and I do want to remind everyone that we are going to rate this not based off of what it could be, but what it was this weekend. So treat it as it was a regular HHN house. What do you give it for what it gave you?
I'm not going to necessarily assign it a number. I'm going to assign it where I think it would have been, like on a normal, like where it would be, like if I had done 10 houses, where I think it would have fell into comparing it to the others. I think it was a middle of the road house. I think at the end of the day, I think it wouldn't have been my least favorite. I don't think it would have been one of my favorites either. I think it would have been kind of where House of the Thousand Corpses ended up falling for me for last year. It's a middle of the road.
Oh, I think that's a tough way to rate it, Mike. I thought you made it harder on yourself, because there are years where I think that could have been a top 3 house. There are years where it could have been a bottom 5 maybe house.
That's bottom 5 is middle, bro.
Yeah, I'll say 3-5. I don't know which one. But there are years where it could have been top 2. Years are just so
really?
Good. Yeah, definitely. There are some good. Nico.
Sorry, I didn't mean to ruin my rating, but really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I am gonna rate it out of 10, and if you want to think about that and do it later, Mike, I think it'll be fun, because then next year we can compare how much better, or if it got better.
Oh yeah, I'll assign it a thing if you want me to. I'd say it's a 6.
A 6. That's fair. Actually, really close to what I was going to go with. I was going to give it a 6.5. For what it is. I enjoyed it a lot. the scares weren't there for me. Everyone was saying this house is extremely intense and terrifying, but it's so hindered by the plexiglass. And it's sad because the fairies are like working their ass off in there.
Yeah.
They are an energetic bunch of scare actors.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that much. So they're killing it. They're doing a great job, but they're very limited. They
With
look like
what
they're
they
kind of
can do.
trapped in a cage in their boo holes.
Yeah.
Again, though, the story is great. Once that house gets a little bit darker, a little bit more, the scares are back. Hopefully, we can get the scares as they were intended. I could see it raising up maybe to like an 8.5, but that's to be seen. And right now, it's only a 6.5.
Totally agree. Miko, what about you?
Well, this house, to me, I think is just in its current state is average. It's very average. Now that I think about it, the pacing of it, to me, I thought was a little weird, and it could be just because of how bright it was in there, and how kind of the plexiglass kind of showed off all the boo holes from a mile away in that house.
Yeah.
Where it really affected that. I thought it was just middle of the road. I would give it probably a 5.5. Not a 5 because I feel like that's a little too harsh, but a 5. I don't think it deserves a 6 either, so that's why I'm going with 5.5. It's better than some houses from last year. Definitely not all the houses from last year. But I'm kind of there with Duff. I see the potential in it, but I don't want to judge it on something that it can be. I have to judge it on what it is.
Yep.
And what it is an average house with not many scares. Great story. Yeah, nothing wrong there, but yeah, just an average house, I think.
And then I'm curious, what do you guys think its potential is? What number could it hit running at full operation?
7.5. Maybe
I think
8.
it's the ceiling
Maybe an 8.
unless they change up some of the sets. Because I do think I was a little underwhelmed of that in a soundstage. I was expecting some big, at least two big elaborate show scenes. And the facade was, while cool, didn't have that grand scale that I was expecting. So I would think that ceiling is 7. I don't think it will ever surpass that.
Fair. All right. So on to The Bride of Frankenstein Lives. Nico, you're the super excited one about this, so we'll let you go off rip here.
Yeah, I thought this was fantastic. I'm really glad that we did Tooth Fairy than this, because I think it may have made this one shine more than it actually was. I think this is a great house, even with the COVID protections. I think its design and aesthetic is pulled off so well that it just executes at such a high level. I think it executes on a micro scale better than Universal Monsters did. I don't think it's as good of a house as Universal Monsters was, just because it's kind of hard to beat having all your favorites in there. But
Yeah.
I still think it was a very good house, and it definitely stands on its own. I would have to give it a 9. I would give it a solid 9.
Wow.
I really loved this house. I think this is definitely top tier for me. Kind of already tipping my hand for where I might rank it, but yeah, I think it's a solid 9. I think its only detractor is I can't even think. I mean, maybe it's just not. The scares were pulled off a lot better in its current state. I think it is at its ceiling. I think it might approve a little bit better without the plexiglass, but once again, I don't think it was that much of a hindrance in this case. Maybe the final spoiler. Maybe the final scare is probably the only thing that is hindered. The callback from last year's scare is the only thing that's probably severely hindered in this house for that. But everything else I thought was done really well and executed very well.
So you think the ceiling? Are you going to call the ceiling 4 to 9 then?
I'm gonna go ahead and call the ceiling at 9, maybe even a 9.25. I don't really see how it can exceed. We'll go into this later. I don't really see how it can get better than it can. I mean, if it does, I would be pleasantly surprised. But I think it's operating at peak efficiency right now, in my opinion.
I will pick it up because I do not agree with that assessment. I believe while it is better set up to handle these precautions than Tooth Fairy is, it still hurts it. One, it's a bit too bright for my liking, a lot of it. There's definitely scares that are missing. I think it would be a lot more intense. I saw a few scenes that are definitely be some decent pinballs. We're missing the bungee scare, which is always, people fucking love bungee
And
scares.
see, I didn't even notice that there was any scares missing. If that's just from my point of view, and maybe that's because this was the 12th house I've ever been in. I haven't been able to recognize it all yet.
That's why it's fun to have you on this show as well, as we get to see a completely different viewpoint than me or Mike, who have done a shit ton of houses. I don't know the number. So maybe we notice things that you don't, or maybe you notice things that we don't. We just overlook some things. So I think it's a cool viewpoint to see. But in this case, I think your ceiling is probably higher than you think it is for this house.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I think if you saw this house running at full capacity, you might shit your pants in the best way possible. So I guess what I said is basically how I feel about the house to add on to everything I said before. And that kind of puts it about a 7.5 for me. I'll say 7.5. Yeah. I think it's probably got a ceiling of about a 9.
Yeah. I would definitely say that. Yeah.
You stole my numbers right from me. I think
Really?
it was. I think it was a good solid 7 to 7.5, and I think it could with it running with the SIF and some of the without plexiglass, it could be a good 9.
That reminds me, real quick, to go back. I think Tooth Fairy heavily missed SIF.
Yes, that was also yes.
The transitions were very just turn a corner, you're in the other room, and I think it really could have used like the meat locker curtains. It could have used some, I don't know, floss with teeth on the end.
Yeah,
like that. It's
I've
definitely
noticed
a house that is built to use SIF, and it did not get to use its SIF.
I've noticed that SIF is probably one of the main things that really puts me on edge and gives me anxiety inside the houses. I do not like being touched. It's not something I talk about too much on the show, but I don't like things touching me, and that that stiff in your face really puts me on edge. So it missing from the houses was very noticeable for me. It really took down the anxiety factor for me inside the houses, and almost to a fact that I wasn't. It didn't feel the same for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the whole time before. I don't know why I never remembered to bring it up, but I think the single biggest thing for me that made this feel like it's not a full Horror Nights house is that there was no SIF. There were no barriers between rooms in any way.
Where's the SIF?
It almost felt like a walkthrough that had some scare actors to me, more than anything, I don't know why, but it just kind of took me out of the immersiveness that much. Obviously, I still enjoyed the houses. They got pretty decent ratings for being in the condition they are, but I think SIF I have found is way more important than I realized.
Yeah, for sure. Me too.
Come back, SIF. Come
now,
back.
Nico, we've taken care of the rankings, but you said you were going to kind of rank it as your all-time. You've done 12 houses now.
It's not my all-time.
Well, I know it's not your all-time. I figured.
Yeah.
I want you to place both houses in your all-time list. Your top 12. Where do these two fit?
Let's start off with Tooth Fairy first. So I kind of have to go through my list and see what it's better as, and then if it's not better than that, it moves up. So
Sure.
we start at the bottom. It's better than Clowns, definitely.
Okay.
It's
I don't know if I agree with that, but
it's better. Well, I mean, everyone knows I hate
Yeah.
Killer Clowns, so
I do agree with that though, Nico. So you got
you
my
think it was
support.
yeah.
I think it's
that
better than Clowns.
I feel like they're apples and oranges. You really cannot compare the two. They're
I mean-
totally different vibes, 100%.
So comparing houses is what this is all about, though.
Yeah, but they're
You have
one's like a fun, almost a comedy level house. That's an IP of a fun IP where you're basically reliving a movie, and the other one is a Tooth Fairy where it's it's claustrophobic and it's telling a story but a totally different feeling. They're very different.
I get what you're saying. They're very tough to compare. But if you're
Yeah.
putting on an all-time list, I mean, you don't have a choice but to compare
Right.
them. You know,
Right.
Killer Clowns doesn't get its own special segment for being Killer Clowns.
Yeah, I get it.
Although I think Jonathan probably has his own section just for Killer Clowns.
Yeah. And now, as you were talking, Mike, I was listening to what you're saying there, and I was trying to compare it to the rest of the ones from last year. And you know what? I think it could just because of how it is in its current state. I think it's better than Clowns, and I think that's it. I think it's 11 all time for me.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Even because I know you weren't a big fan of House of a Thousand Corpses.
I wasn't
You
a big fan, but it scared me at least.
And it did pick it up at the end, you said. You said you liked, not at the end, but you, looking back at it, you just liked it more than you
I did like it more. Yeah, and I did like that more, but I was trying to compare it to it's really close with Stranger Things. I think Stranger Things might have the edge to it because I kind of liked how with Stranger
Grandiose.
Things last year,
Yeah.
you were going through different things instead of just through this one house.
Yeah.
I kind of like the fact of going through the different things on the Stranger Things one. You know, and I don't think it was good as Nightingales. It's not as good as Fathom Corp. Yeah, that's,
Look how you call
I know. That's a fear. I know what it's actually called. I just like calling it Fathom Corp. But yeah, Us, yeah, it's not as good as Us because I really liked Us. But yeah,
not as good as Yeti. Yeah, so it's 11 for you.
Yeah.
Pretty safe.
yeah, it's 11 for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm really interested to hear how high Bride makes it up.
Okay, Bride is pretty high up there.
I hope so. You gave it a fucking 9, dude.
Yeah, it's so my number 1 is Universal Monsters, and my number 2 is Yeti,
Ah.
and my number 3
Huh?
is still Graveyard Games,
Ah.
but Brides is a 4th. Brides
Okay.
slides right in there. Here's the thing between, especially Yeti, Graveyard Games, and Brides, they are all very, very close to me. For me, Universal Monsters, I think, just separates it off just a little bit from the rest. But my top 4 is, I mean, they could move around. To be honest with you, I just, I think it is top tier for me. It's gonna be something I'll always fondly remember, and it's definitely gonna be probably a house I won't forget. Unlike Tooth Fairy, which I'll probably be like, oh yeah, it was that one with the facade and the plexiglass. But Brides, I will probably remember.
Hopefully you get a better picture of it next year then.
Yeah, I hope so.
But wow, 4, that's, I know you only have 12 houses, but that's pretty good for being a COVID restricted house, For the things they had to do to the house for it still to get that high is impressive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not going to fully play along, but I'll probably say in their current state, neither of these houses cracks my top 50.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed them. I had a lot of fun, and I think they have a lot of potential, and they could I could see Bride being top 10 house maybe when it's all said and done, when it gets a full run. But in current state, it just doesn't have enough there for me to get it very high.
Yeah, I agree with you, Duff. I'm trying. I'll just compare it to last year. I think it's definitely was, but last year was so stacked. I would say it was mid-tier. If it was also comparing it to some of the others last year, I think I'd put it like it would be like probably 4 or 5. Comparing it to last year. All time, I would put it in the top quarter probably.
Okay, yeah. I realize I did say Pride on the top 50. It probably is in my top 50 currently. There's been some pretty bad houses.
Yeah.
So that was a little rude of me to say. Tooth Fairy is not in my top 50, probably current state though.
Excellent.
All right, so let's wrap it up from Halloween Horror Nights and quickly get to what else we did this weekend.
Yeah, definitely.
So we were fortunate enough to be invited to go to Scream and Stream's media preview. That was the next day, and we all hopped in the car together and drove down past Point Siena and way into the country.
Yep. So this is deep in Kissimmee, at Boggy Creek, where the airboat rides are. And if you don't know, this is a haunted drive-through event. You've probably heard about it. If you listen to us, you probably are on Twitter and social media, and they are very active there. So you know about them. Yeah, I was super excited to go check it out. Hang out with my pals, and they treated us pretty well too.
Yeah, they did.
Got in. We got some free food, some free drinks, and then Nico, you really enjoyed that whole like back area behind the barbecue restaurant they had.
Oh yeah, that's my shit back there.
Yeah,
those big trees with the Spanish moss, and they had some like 90s music playing. It was nice. It was just a lovely evening, and it also helped that it was the first lovely evening since March. So
yeah,
just happened to be beautiful out. We should mention that food options they had. What was it? Bacon ranch tots.
Bacon
That's what I got.
Pizza fries.
They also have pizza fries and pizza tots.
Pizza tots.
Apparently, they have gator bites that were not there when we got there, unfortunately. But yeah,
they have some drinks options, wine and beer. So yeah, they definitely have enough. One thing we'll let you know is that if you are going to partake of alcohol, you do need to have someone who is going to be driving the car, who is not going to partake in alcohol, because one person has to be the DD. If you partake at the property, they're going to mark your hands, so you're not going to be allowed to then drive through. So if you do want to drink it at the event, go through the haunt first, and then come hang out and have if you all want to drink.
It's not that we endorse drunk driving or anything, but we know you're responsible. You can do it.
Right.
We trust you to do the right thing.
Right. No, I'm saying that you can still drink at the event. Just go through the drive-through part, and then you can all have a drink together. And will you talk about what you just experienced?
Well, then you still got to drive home.
I mean,
I would recommend, but I would. No, you're right, Mike. I would recommend it in that order. I would recommend.
I mean, one drink is not drinking and driving, stuff. But they don't. You have one drink and drive for liability to drive through Scream and Stream.
They
is more what I was saying. They do not want you to even have one drink on their property.
Correct. If you get X'd, you're done. No driving.
Right. But so. What were you going to say, Nico?
I would say I would actually recommend doing it in that order from last night. We actually went to the thing first, like the little get together, that little outdoor area. We went there first, then we did the drive-through. But I think I would have preferred to do the drive-through first and then the little area. So that's just a little tip from your friends.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that.
So we're going to just do a basic, a little bit of kind of what our thoughts were. We're going to avoid any spoilers because no one else has experienced that except the media. And we're going to kind of talk about kind of some of the attractions that they're also doing. And we're probably going to do a more in-depth talk when we talk about some of the other local haunts that we're going to try to catch through the season, and kind of one big show where we compare the different local haunts that we got to experience. So Duff, what did you think initially of a Scream and Stream?
So I gotta say they impressed me, to be honest. It exceeded my expectations. I thought they ran a pretty good operation, first of all.
Uh-huh.
I loved the actual like path you drive down. Like Nico said before, these trees with the like long hanging Spanish moss. The ambiance was perfect for a haunt like this.
Yes.
The little sets they had were pretty nice. The scare actors were energetic. I mean, I didn't think they'd be able to like nail scares, but I saw Nico jump like in the driver's seat, fully jump.
Yeah, no, Nico was scared. I think Nico was more scared at Scream and Stream than he was at any point at Howling Horror Nights.
I also wasn't driving a car through.
But still, like I think they were able to pull off, and maybe it was just such a unique experience of like driving a car and the stories that they were creating. You seemed pretty unnerved by a lot of it, Nico.
Oh, I was unnerved. It didn't seem that way. I was.
It was fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Very fun.
It also does follow a pretty decent story as well.
Yeah. I love the storytelling that they're able to pull up. I am sold by I'm really excited, not only that just how good Scream and Stream turned out to be, but drive-through haunts, man. There's something there. I think this is a really unique way to do a haunt, and I think it's going to be fun to see in the future what we could potentially see from a drive-through haunt.
Yeah. And it is worth to note that today they said on Twitter that looks like they actually had more stuff than what we saw last night, because there was a big storm that went through last night that kind of broke some of their stuff. So I hope they can get that fixed. But I didn't think it detracted that much from what I could see.
Yeah, that's why I think I was trying to be hesitant of reviewing it, just because they did have a giant storm before they came in. I think we want to try to check it out one more time before we actually do a review. But yes, they had a big storm that really hindered what they were able to show us for media night. But even without that, I was very impressed. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should add that we did notice that there were things missing too. Like it wasn't just a kind of we found out today. I remember at the end.
No, we knew.
We were like, there was some stuff missing. Not so much up front, but our finale kind of was hindered by the storm that came through.
Yeah.
As you have probably seen, they have an icon called Fog Queen, who was out for media night, kind of like in the back area that we were talking about earlier, but when we drove through the haunt, she was not to be seen. We believe it was due to the storm and complications that came from it.
Yeah, there was definitely some show scenes that were altered, and they were full disclosure with that they did have to pick and choose what they were able to present to us because of what happened. But it's still very fun. So let's talk about kind of what some of the other things that's the drive-through haunt. They're also doing like a kid-friendly trick-or-treat drive during the day on certain days. So if you are hesitant, like I am, to do any sort of trick-or-treating for your kids this year, this would it's a socially distanced, basically trick-or-treat drive. So this might be a way to give them a little bit of that experience. They're also doing black light nights. They're doing haunted house airboat rides. They're doing a few other things that we were told by one of the employees there that I don't see on their website, so I'm not going to necessarily repeat them, but this sounds like they're going to start doing a lot of really cool things at this event. So definitely keep an eye out.
And then tickets do range from $57 to $75, depending on the day you go.
Per car.
That is not per person, that is per vehicle. So cram your friends in and make it a nice, fun, cheap night out at a haunt.
Yeah, and keep an eye out for discounts because I noticed that they're doing like an annual pass holder discount. So if you were an annual pass holder at any of the like theme parks, they're going to give you a discount. If you were a hospitality employee, they're going to give you looks like an even deeper discount. So they're definitely like Duff says, the prices range on the night, and they also range on kind of the discounts. So definitely keep an eye out on it.
Yeah. So I'd say we definitely recommend checking it out, even though we didn't get to see the full thing, and we still thought it would be worth paying the price for us three to go see it, right?
Yeah, I think we liked it so much that we have been talking about potentially paying ourselves and going taking a look.
Oh, I definitely will be.
Definitely for the airboat ride.
Oh, that's yeah. Which is per person, not per vehicle. So
right.
You don't get to rent out the whole airboat. Doesn't work that way. So if you do want to check that out, they do have a trailer. You can buy the tickets at screamandstream.com. That's scream, the letter N, stream.com. Again, we do highly recommend checking that out. Thank you to the team over at Scream and Stream for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. We really did enjoy it.
And we'll be back to give you some money as well because one, we want to see it again, and two, we need to see what that finale is really supposed to look like because I am curious.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right.
Just a heads up. It's about so if you're planning on going, make sure you give yourself ample time to get down there. It is probably going to be a little bit longer than what you think it's going to take to get down there.
Yeah.
So it's going to be about 45 minutes from Disney and about an hour from Universal, if that gives you any good reference there.
Yeah, and drive safe going and coming because we did see a lot of wildlife in the street and around the street on the way down there. So please pay attention what you're doing driving down there.
But on the plus side, Nico did teach us how to play Hey Cow.
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
So, yeah, that was nice. I now know what that is.
Yeah.
I do kind of want to go back to I almost said Horror Nights. The houses that are open during Universal, or well, we're open for a weekend potentially.
Yeah, no, we can go back there before we wrap up.
Nothing really to add to it. I did just want to say, obviously, we didn't do like a house dissection like you're used to us doing. That was more like a reaction to our experience. Maybe down the road we do a house dissection. Although I'd say it's probably not a good shot until after we get the full experience next year.
No, yeah, we'll probably hold off maybe.
Yeah, don't really be on the lookout for that. This is just more us discussing it.
And we might try to take a look at these a little bit more if things come or go, or if they change a little bit. If we notice some changes going on, we'll definitely bring it up throughout the haunt season. Well, we're going to be talking about these houses.
Oh, for sure. If they're here through, what would it be, like November 1st, I believe would be probably the last day. We'll be talking about it through then and a little bit past it as well. So strap in. We got a lot more to say about these houses.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Are we ready to wrap up?
Yeah, I believe so. Do remember that if you listen to the Stay and Screamcast on our feed this week and you enjoyed that, that'll be on the Neozaz / the Catacombs of Halloween Horror Nights feed next week.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the streets.